yeah, just for no other reason alone. If you want to check out an interesting behind this in between lines thing of nobility and stuff in Firemere, read this book. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Brandon Wheeler. I have a strong mouth because I was in the army. Something heat-wise happened to me, so I can't talk right unless I bite down something. Bad bike biff, I love that. So it's just a speech aid. Moving on. So that's just a constant thing I'm going to ask. So if anyone asked beforehand, that's what it is. Okay, so uh, about a month ago, I finally posted a video of me reviewing Fellowship of the Ring because I got them for my birthday, and I finally got around to reading it after The Hobbit. And that was my thoughts on the Fellowship of the Ring. But now I have completed the Two Towers. So I saw when I completed the Fellowship of the Ring book, and I said I put out the video on June 30th. And I'm like, wow, I read this within a month. Well, that's impressive. I wanted this to be out like on July 31st, at least get done on July 31st. So I kind of speed read it, you can say in a way. So that's what happened. But if you don't know what this is, which unlikely you don't, but this is Lord of the Rings, of course, second book, The Two Towers. What is it dealing with about? Well, you should basically all know what it is, but it's basically dealing with the continuation of Frodo and trying to destroy the ring with Sam, and you have the side stories also of like Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli trying to find Merry and Pippin, along with someone they did not expect showing back up. Of course, we find out what happens to Boromir, everything like that. But you've probably seen the movie, you probably know the book, because a lot of people seemingly have commented on the first video and all that. And thank you to the person who showed me that, oh yeah, Durin's Day also has, people. One has someone's made a cool song out of it, but also has John Rhys Davis actually doing the poem. I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know that was a thing, but yeah. Actually, I'll start off with that. As far as, because this is a book review, not that many poems in this. Like, at all. Like in the first book, Fellowship, there's so many different poems and everything like that, and different sayings. This one, not so much at all. I mean, you have Gollum's like, so just the salt, the catch a fish thing and stuff, which he says actually that before the Dead Marshes, or around the Dead Marshes, but not at the pool. But the only other one really of importance is that I can physically remember is Sam's Oliphant song. Because every time it says when Sam recites poetry, he gets up and he puts his hands behind his back or whatever. And he did this like, he stouts this like poem about an elephant. Because it's like, oh, because he asked like, do they have any elephants over there? I was like, what's elephant precious? And he does the elephant. It's so simple, but it's just like, that's funny. It's literally one of the funniest things. Just like, okay, that might be one of the best poems. It's just kind of silly and how all that worked. I was like, okay, Sam, that's funny. But so not as many poems and stuff in the second book here. However, there is a lot to unpack because if you've only seen the movies, again, all the movies, they take a lot of inspiration for the books. They do change a lot, but also they do follow on the same pathway in a lot of ways. Just change some things up. Now, literally, because it's called the Two Towers, you could literally have split this into two different books, like two physical different books, and it'd be the two stories going on because it's, yeah, the two story, like in the movie, intertwines them. The book, it's completely separate. Like you have book 3 dealing with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas trying to go find Merry and Pippin, and book 4 is with Frodo and Sam because he separated them out in the books. Like book 1 was like the hobbits all the way up to about Rivendell, and then them going off. So you have two different things going on and everything like that. So starting with the first book, or book 3, but the first part with Aragorn and all that plot line. It kind of settles out like what you have in the movie, where they're trying to go find him and everything. A little bit more involved. it doesn't really give. It mentions what urukai kind of are and stuff, but movie kind of gives more definition what urukai are. I mean, it doesn't really. The book just mentions urukai, but it's like, are they a type of orc? It's just like movie makes them more distinct, more fearsome. Book doesn't exactly make it like that to me. Not exactly. Of course, I could be misreading it, but it does mention the white hand of Saruman on their shields and stuff like that. Uh, there's a whole section, kind of like the first book, where it has the things with, concerning hobbits and everything, where he gets into the details, everything like that. In this book, he does kind of the same thing, but with the Ents. The Ents have a lot more history and stuff going on than what's portrayed in the movie, even though the Two Towers movie does give a little more time to them in the extended versions and stuff, which, as far as extended version stuff, I'm not really for the extended versions outside of Return of the King. I'm like, okay, Return of the King, I feel those parts kind of necessary, like with Saruman and the Witch King. Two Towers and Fellowship, like, eh. Although after reading the book, I'm like, okay, maybe some things are more interesting and stuff, like especially more with the Ents, because there's a lot of detail with the Ents. He mentions, I think it might have been in the movie. I don't recall if it was the theatrical. It was especially. It might have been at least in the extended version of the Entwives, and Treebeard gets into detail with that, with kind of like how they lost the Entwives, but they get might have been a poem to it, but he gets into a type thing talking about who the Entwives were and everything, and also the Ents who have become more tree-like hories. Or I don't know exactly how to say the word. That is something that I bring up in the extended version, not in the movie theatrical, but in the extended. You see all the Urkai run into the forest of Fangorn, which detailing about that. But then you hear a bunch of noises and stuff, and the kind of the trees rattling, but you don't really see anything with it. And it's just kind of mentioned, oh, the trees are rising up or something. Like, all right. In the book, it actually kind of mentions that the Horis, or the trees, ends to kind of become tree-like, or even the trees themselves, they, yeah, they go to town and wreck stuff. Absolutely. And it's just kind of like, oh, okay. Although, of course, some of the orcs, of course, get away. But it's just kind of interesting. And definitely, I would say John Rhys Davis' voice for Treebeard is probably spot on to how I imagine him and everything. But it gives another, some other ends like Quicksilver or Quick Beam. I keep thinking it started with a Quick. But he was more involved. He was named and everything as well. Also, Fangorn is Treebeard's name. Like Fangorn Forest is like Treebeard or something. Is like that's his name is Fangorn, but he's also known as Treebeard. And it's just kind of like, why does he have multiple names? What? There's a lot of just details of that, but big difference between the movie and book version. Of course, it might be more simplified. You could say in a movie. Book version, the Ents are already kind of aroused and wanting to do. They're like, you know what? We're gonna go fight. That was already aroused because they were seeing all the stuff that was already happening with the orcs hewing at them and stuff, and they got at it and they went fighting. They were already ready to fight. Also, going back to the Entwives weren't all the ones you see in the movie are supposed to be all male because they lost the Entwives. They don't know where the Entwives are. So the female Ents, they don't know where they're at. They're like somewhere, but they had hope that they would be reunited one day, and I hope they would be. Ed, did they reveal that somewhere in Return of the King or something that they found the Entwives? Because it's like this is depressing if they don't find them, because they kept looking for them. They seemingly left the forest, have gone different places and times before by Treebeards again, never found them. Also, differences between Ents in the book and movie. It seems they're both tree-like, but it seems I would say the movie version of Ents are maybe more flexible, if that's the way I would want to say it, because it seems like they're able to move around better. Whereas book version, for Treebeard to sit down, he had to basically kind of like use his arms to like lay himself down and then to like push himself up because he couldn't really bend at the waist because like bark tree. So he's not really movable like that compared, I would say, movie, but they're probably about as strong, but they are faster, I would say. I think book wise, because it was a quick meme. he was like at the gate, and then he sees Saruman at the tower, and he's outside, and he starts running at him, and he almost catches Saruman before he's even able to enter his tower. And that's pretty fast to cover that quick of a distance. Because even if it's just the movie version, you see how far outside the wall is to the tower, and trying to run that fast to catch a guy going up the stairs. I know Saruman's old, but still, that's fast. So I would say book version they can be faster, strong wise, but they're definitely more. So overall, they're about the same, but just more maneuverability in the movies, and maybe book version is they're more rigid and everything, but they're fast. But there's a lot of he getting, I guess, because knowing about Tolkien a little bit, people say, oh, he's obsessed with trees and nature and everything like that. Well, he gets in a lot of stuff with that in here. Gosh. So that's just what he does with the Ents. It was in the extended version. You have Merry and Pippin. They drink a little bit of the water. Mary's like, "Oh, I'm looking a little taller now." There actually is a comment in the book of when they see the hobbits standing at the thing. It is mentioned that they quote unquote look taller. Now it might have been because like, oh, they look healthy, but it actually might be that they look a little bit taller because drinking of the water from the forest and everything. It actually has helped them. Kept saying Ent wash stuff like that. So difference in that, but it's kind of like a comment made and it's applied. Merry and Pippin describe everything like what happens with the Ents because when they arrive, kind of like in the movie, they find everything kind of already destroyed and stuff. But that's what Merry and Pippin go through. Everything basically kind of like what happened to Merry and Pippin. It's basically like how you see in the movie. They get captured and everything. Pippin drops the leaf. There's a lot of different stuff. Just kind of follows that same line. So their story is basically the same. It's just a lot with Treebeard and everything like that. Oh gosh. Now, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Their side, basically the same thing, going to find him and everything. But one difference is that when they find Éomer, or Éomer finds them, they kind of surround them and everything. Of course, Gimli's like, tell your name, horse master, and I will tell you mine. That does kind of happen. But, Aragorn announces himself right there, moving his sword and saying, like, I am this, 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 and this. And everyone's like, okay, cool. But, of course, Éomer gives him the horses and all that. But one thing that really stands out, and this is going to be a thing for both sections, and I'll talk a little bit more when I get to Faramir, but one thing that really stands out in this is the Rohirrim actually had their own language, because it says that at different moments the Rohirrim were speaking in their own languages, and that Éomer even spoke to them in their language to speak back and forth. Really, the focus on language in this book is now unintentional, but in The Two Towers, if you notice, it is the movie that uses Elvish the most, I would say, because Legolas and everything, it's the one that uses Elvish the most as far as language difference in a movie. And I would say unintentional, even though it was not really Elvish, but it kind of does reflect the book, because Rohirrim are speaking in their own language, and the fact that they even had one was like, oh, that's interesting. So it was fascinating seeing that alive and seeing what culture, really feeling that they had culture. Now, I thought they were originally based on like the Polish, the winged hussars and stuff like that. But I looked up briefly, before the things, and he based them more on Scandinavian type of influence and Anglo-Saxon and stuff. I'm like, okay, so what would a Scandinavian Polish language mix sound like? Or does he have the book written somewhere for language? I know there was stuff for Elvish because my brother had one years ago. My brother was a Lord of the Rings almost fanatic when the movies came out, and he had an Elvish book, and he was trying to think about learning Elvish for a little while, but that didn't last long. But so I know the Elvish stuff exists. Is there anything about Rohan stuff? Like, what would the equivalent of what Tolkien made for that, or did he only make Elvish? Question is, what the Dwarvish stuff look like, or the Gondorian language? And I found out looking at Gondor, like Gondor is based on Italy. Really? Of course, it's based on other things as well, but also Italy. I'm like, oh. So Faramir would be speaking that type of Italian. Okay. Well, I don't know. Anyway, back to book three still. We're getting the Faramir in the last one. So, Faramir, he's not banished by the quote unquote king or anything like that. Not like the movie. This is where it starts differentiating. Of course, they meet Gandalf and everything. Forest is much more alive, though. Like, they stand by the forest because they see Merry and Pippin seemingly went inside by tracks, but before they went in, they spend the night. It's, they seemingly, like a tree reaches over to the fire and it seems like warms itself up. Like it's doing this, like to warm itself, and everyone's just standing like, what? And of course, Legolas, one hand, he doesn't like the forest because it's dangerous, but of course, he loves trees and everything like that. Oh, I will say this. I actually prefer movie Legolas. I know it's just, it's hard to distinguish Legolas's personality to me in the book. Like, honestly, I see the movie version. Yeah, he's more quiet and everything, but there's kind of a humor and wit, which is there in the book, but it's kind of hard to distinguish, like, what is he like as an elf? I know he's a Mirkwood elf and everything, but Gimli, you can definitely tell, has much more personality with everything in it. It's hard for me to read Legolas, at least. At least that's to me. I actually I had to pick between the two. I would take movie version. It's just how it is. Speaking of Gimli, I forget about that. About AMR, part of the reason all that thing happened, I'll cut your head off, dwarf. That part of that happened because they mentioned they go through Lorien and Lothlorien or whatever, and I think it's Amor mentions like a elf witch, the lady there. Gimli takes offense, and he threatens him with that. He's like, "You will apologize and everything," and gosh, he takes huge offense that Galadriel is called. That Amor wasn't respectful towards Galadriel, and he's about to really fight him right there and there because simply Gimli is full on in love with Galadriel. He's full on in love with Galadriel. It's like, you will pay respect to the finest woman who's ever existed. And everyone's like, okay, sure. So it's just funny. Like, okay, Gimli. Much more of a, hey, I don't know. Oh, that's hypothetically, because it does start with G. Would Gimli have named a daughter Galadriel? Because I don't know if he had any kids or anything, but question, would he? Technically, it would make sense for him to do so based on that, because he said the strands from that he got from her, he would be passed down through his generations and everything. So I would imagine he would go back and have kids and everything. So did he? I hope he named a daughter Galadriel, because that'd be something. I don't know. No, just thinking. All right, but they get to Edoras, or it has multiple names. It's like, wait, Misohold, Edoras, what's going on? They get through all that, but it doesn't seem like the king's necessarily like infused by Saruman or anything like that, which I'll get it to in a moment. But Gandalf like basically makes the light shine in the room, and that kind of wakens the king out of his slumber, like because he knew his son was dead already, and he was kind of depressed over that, but he was being roused and everything. I was like, okay, yeah, we need to do some fighting here. Grimtongue is as slimy as he was in the movie, but he also very interesting point. The king offers him, ride with us, or you can ride to your master Saruman. In other words, you stay with us to fight and everything, or you're going to ride to your master Saruman. And in the movie version, the extended version, Aragorn is the one that lifts out a hand and he spits at Aragorn in the extended. And that's where we see the thing with the ring and the extended and stuff like that. Book version, he spits at Theoden and before he runs off. And it immediately says a soldier comes over and wipes the floor where the spit has because it was defiling and stuff to the king and all that. And for some reason, this section is very poignant to me. It's just like, wow. This section, what goes on with Rohan, because between Rohan and Gondor movie versions, I prefer Rohan. But it was just, I don't know, the kingly thing. Then Awen has a few lines. It mentions her being there and everything, and how Of course, all of them have like long blonde hair and stuff, kind of like a portrait of the movie. But she's. I know the movie version they kind of make her like interested in Aragorn and stuff. Book version, she kind of stumbles when she speaks to Aragorn once, giving him a drink, and she kind of speaks to him and everything. Whether she's awed by the presence of him being a thing, or she may actually have found him attractive or so. It's like okay, so it's not too much of a leeway to change that or so because she didn't speak to anyone else before she seemingly spoke to Aragorn briefly. That just saying male Aragorn stuff. I'm like, okay, but it a whole thing with Rohan is different. It speaks of like many days, them doing this and that. They were going to go ride towards Saruman initially. They weren't going to go to Helm's Deep. They were going to ride towards Isengard to fight. But oh, speaking of riding, Shadowfax. Big difference though in the movie between the book. Shadowfax is mentioned, I think, in the first book, or in the first video. Shadowfax is just a horse of Rohan. It was one of like the best, most prized horses. It wasn't able to be broken. He allowed you to ride on him, not you forcing him to ride, and he allowed Gandalf, of course. But he wasn't like this mythical horse, kind of like what they made him in the movie. He was just kind of more of a mythical horse, but with Rohan, he was like a top thing of Rohan, not like the movie. Like he's kind of like a majestic outside horse. He wasn't kind of like that. But that's just something I know is very different from that version to the book. But they were going to originally. Oh, also, armor. They were grabbing armor and stuff from Edoras and everything like that. Aragorn grabbed a shield, as did Legolas. Legolas also grabbed a shield and stuff. And they actually put on armor. Like in the movie, they put on armor, but that he actually grabbed a shield and sword, it says, and a helmet. And I'm like I said, a helmet and a shield and sword? Interesting. Gimli didn't take that. Because it says like all the armor of the world wouldn't be as nearly as good as the stuff of the dwarven. I was like, okay. In the movie, they have him do that long length thing, which is mentioned, but nonetheless, his armor that he had was already superior to anything Rohan basically had at that point. But they're going to go ride to Isengard, but then they see this black host start coming. So then they divert to Helm's Deep, where they already have men there, and then they go to Helm's Deep. Now, there's no elves like in the movie and everything like that, because what Jackson did is that they wanted to show the sacrifices of the people that were going on elsewhere there and kind of combine it, which to try to combine a 3-hour movie is okay, because there are mentions of elves trying to do stuff elsewhere. Again, the dwarves back at like the Misty Mountain, having to kind of keep the orcs off their property, keep the orcs at bay at the gate and everything like that. That's why they even initially came to the council to begin with. So him trying to show that is like, okay, that's fine. As far as how many men they had at Helm's Deep, I mean, they at least had 1,000. What was it? Maybe 4,000? Maybe? I'd say maybe about 4,000. Not exactly sure on the estimate, but it didn't really give an account of how many orcs, Uruk-hai, whatever, were actually going to Helm's Deep until Gandalf, Merry and Pippin giving an account and everything that happened. They saw Gandalf ride up to Treebeard and said, Treebeard, I need your help. I have about 10,000 orcs coming to the place. So that's where we get the estimate about 10,000 orcs. But it wasn't just orcs that was going. It was also a bunch of wild men. In the movie, you see Saruman rising up the wild men. They took your villages. They took your homes. And them doing that, that's accurate. But they also were instrumental in Helm's Deep. They fought along them. They went along like the bridge. They went doing a bunch of stuff. And there was quite a bit of them. A few hundred, maybe 1,000. So it's at least 10,000 orcs. But it could have been, what? Maybe like 12,000, 13,000? Of course, the movie gets away with this with Sauron saying tens of thousands. But my lord, there is no such force. You were saying. So tens of thousands is... Okay, so at least 10,000 strong at least, as even Aragorn said. So it was 10,000 plus, no matter what. So it matches. As far as the book version account, kind of goes very poorly for the inhabitants of Helm's Deep. Of course, it does focus on Gimli and Legolas doing a kill off, essentially. Gimli wins it, like in movie and book version. Though movie version, Legolas is bitter about it, and he tries to steal the already last kill, but it was already embedded in, with Gimli's axe in his nervous system. Book version doesn't have that. It just Gimli just pretty much straight out one. And Legolas is like, "I'm glad for you. I'll let you have it." Also, Gimli at Helm's Deep, he was able to go into the caverns that were there um, behind Helm's Deep and everything, and he fell in love with the place. He absolutely loved, and everyone's like, "Why, you want to mine it?" He's like, "No, we're not going to mine it. We're going to preserve this place. This place is awesome. We'd only make the smallest chips to try to maybe find some other that they expand it. But other than that, we would keep it the way it is. This place is amazing. I want to go see it again." And of course, Legolas is like, "I want to do the same thing with the woods. So you come back with me to see the woods. I'll come to see the caves with you since I didn't get to see that." And it's like, "It's a deal, Master Alf." He's just like, "Oh, this place is beautiful." It focuses a lot more on Gimli with the book stuff than movie, which makes sense because The Hobbit started with dwarves. As much as, it wants to focus a lot on elves, it focuses a lot on dwarves in a lot of ways because Hobbit started with dwarves. Coming to meet a hobbit at his house with invited by a wizard. This is kind of like, so getting more background with like how a dwarf feels about the whole area and stuff. It's like, okay, it's interesting. Um, oh gosh, what else? Of course, then they get there. The Palantir, oh, Saruman. All right, get my thoughts together here, Saruman. I finally get to see Saruman in the tower, and he starts speaking in such a way to bring his like a voice out of like reason and everything else to kind of like hypnotize people almost. And I was actually working on the Rohan riders who were like standing there because like in the movie, of course he dies in the movie, but book version, no, he's just speaking out over the counter to everybody or over the banister, and it's actually like having a hypnotic effect on everyone to kind of be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe Saruman should give us counsel. But Theoden is like, nah, we're not having that today. And he breaks him off, and of course Gandalf expels him from the council. His staff breaks. Saruman. I had a lot more thoughts on Saruman with everything. I mean, Christopher Lee, yeah, he plays him pretty much exactly what you would think. But again, it doesn't really give his voice, though, is powerful and very manipulative and stuff like that. But it doesn't, like movie version again. First one, it shows like he was the one that made the mountain fall, whereas the book version kind of made it seem like it was cut out of us. It's cut out, however you say, the mountain itself. That was just like, nah, you're not passing by me. Whether that was influenced by Saruman or not, I don't know. But I almost feel like the movie expanded Saruman's role in some ways. Book version, he might have been doing the exact same thing, but maybe more behind the scenes than explicit like the movie in some ways. Of course, yeah, the manufacturing and all that, but Saruman, I had a whole bunch of thoughts, but it's just kind of like, hopefully it comes back to me. I'll speak about it later on, but at the tower, Grima takes the Palantir and throws it down as an attempt to try to hit like Theoden or whatever, but misses. Pippin picks it up. And of course, Saruman, when he finds out Grimtongue, threw it out, of course he's angry because they hear him yelling. But Pippin, they're not back at Edoras yet. They get to like a campsite, and because Pippin had picked it up and gave it to Gandalf, he had this feeling like, I want to see it again. And of course, he's being drawn, honestly, by Sauron, I think, more than likely. So he picks it up again at the campsite. And of course, what happens, but it's just a little bit different than Gandalf. Instead of riding the Edoras, takes him to go right to Gondor. But Pippin was just being Pippin. Oh, another big book version. Éomer is at Helm's Deep. Movie version, he's not. Gandalf, of course, goes to get thousands of soldiers who are also out fighting at Fangor and elsewhere to come help save the day. But Éomer is at Helm's Deep. Éowyn is not. There are women and children there because there's a guy already there. I forgot his name, but There are some women and children that are in the cavern and stuff like that, but Eowyn is not there. She's back at Edoras to be leader in case that Theoden does not return. So that is what happens with that. I had much more thoughts, but it took a while to read through that. It is a little bit of a slug to read through the end stuff, I will say. It's just kind of like, okay, this is getting a little bit went on, especially with Merry and Pippin talking about how everything happened and stuff. It gets a little bit stuff. I was more excited with the Helm's Deep section. Just like with the Rohan to Helm's Deep was more like where I was more intrigued and involved, but it gets a little bit sluggish with that. Book 4, Frodo and Sam. Book version has it, extended version has, the thing with the rope where it unties itself and everything. That actually happens in the book. Also, I'll say, extended version Frodo, just saying, extended version Frodo seems more like a jerk. Just saying. Has anyone ever noticed that this is like real elvish rope? This is like, that just extended version Frodo seems a little bit more jerk-like. Just saying. Big difference though. The book version of Frodo and Gollum's relationship and movie version completely different. Movie version, they have like Gollum starting to influence and take advantage of Frodo, who's becoming more and more succumb to the ring. Book version doesn't really have that. He's Sam keeps mentioning to him, like, I think he's going to betray sometime and everything. And Frodo's like, yeah, if he does, though, he's going to die. Or he'll slink back to his enemy or something like that. It's just like, Frodo doesn't give a crap in the book. Frodo's ready to, is like, yeah, he doesn't fully trust Gollum either. He wants to. He does. He wants to. But he doesn't really. So it's just kind of like, huh, interesting. Before I speak to Faramir stuff first, I'll continue going on. Stuff happens with Faramir, the Oliphant stuff, that battle thing, the caves. I want to get to the end of the book stuff first. The Shelob's Lair happens in this book. Sam's not, cast away or anything by influence of Gollum and Frodo and stuff like that. That doesn't happen. Sam goes with Frodo into Shelob's Lair, and that's where they're at, and they go through all that. Now, movie version, I'll give pass because try to explain so many details. Even extended version, they focus on the Aragorn's ring, stuff like that. So many details. I know there's stuff about certain swords like Merry and Pippin have, and like Return of the King, stuff like that. There's so many details that like Sam's sword wasn't really able to get through a lot of things. Frodo's sword could because of being an elvish blade. It had a little bit more, like powers, just magic or something to be able to cut through things more easily. And again, Glandring's Gandalf's sword glowed blue too when there was orcs nearby. Not just Sting. Of course, Sting was more substantial to that plot, so it's like, okay, focus more on that. But they were going through Shelob's Lair together, and it speaks a lot to how disgusting Shelob is. And Sauron knew where Shelob was. It's like off in that little section, and Sauron was like, okay, she's there. That's all right. Because it said, like, if orcs went through and they died, I got more. Doesn't matter. Or if there's prisoners you want to get rid of, send them to Shelob. It's like it literally says that Sauron considered Shelob like his pet cat. Almost. It says like he considered it almost like a pet cat would be. And it's just kind of like, okay, that's a weird thing. That's a weird relationship. I do know from, what was it? There was these Middle Earth games. I never played them, but I watched some videos of the plot lines, stuff like that. Shelob was this kind of like ethereal being that Sauron was involved with and stuff. I know that's not necessarily canon to the books, so I guess I shouldn't focus on that. But if that's what you think of Shelob, it just basically describes Shelob as being, just a mean old spider. Ancient spider. Very ancient. Something related to this other monstrous entity that existed. Of course, Sam's able to defeat her using Frodo's sword. Again, movie version in Return of the King doesn't mention why Sam only used Frodo's sword, because he had his sword he could have brought out at different times, but again, being an elvish blade, it had much more of a cut, being able to cut through, because it said her hide was very strong, and that the elvish blade would be able to cut through it more, though even then it wouldn't be able to cut through that, because nothing was able to cut through it. It hit her in the eye and stuff, though, and that was like her weakest spot. So of course that was maiming to her, and also underneath, she tried to like crush him, but stab like in the movie, and yeah, that was bad. Of course, there was a lot of slime and stuff. Also, big difference. Gollum tries attacking right there. Like while they're running out of the cave, Frodo's ahead, and Gollum attacks Sam from behind. He's like, "I swore I would not, mess with the master, but I would not. Didn't swear I would hurt with you." Action-wise, this is unique. I don't know why. Action-wise, details for a battle. This is the most detailed in that fight between Sam and Gollum right there than probably every other section of the book so far, fight-wise. It actually gets into detail about like how they're like struggling. Sam hits him using the staff and everything. It's like, where was all this detail of fighting beforehand? Of Tolkien? What? But this is like, why did you decide to go all out with this? But he did. Is the Sam fighting Gollum off? I was like, where was all this detail with stuff before? It's just like almost vague stuff and generalities with fighting. Where was this fighting descriptions before? What? I don't know. But he did. But he fights Gollum off, but of course Gollum slinks away. Slinker and Stinker, as Sam wants to call him. Oh, man. I gotta mention that. That's his nickname that he has for Gollum, Slinker and Stinker, his two personalities. They're sitting at the top of the thing before they go into the cave, and Frodo and Sam never go to Osgiliath at all. They meet Faramir, and then they go to this path and everything like that. But they have that kind of conversation, like the stories that really mattered up there at the top and everything. And also a little bit afterwards, like, I want to hear more about Sam. That all happened right before Shelob's lair. But Sam mentions, like, I wonder if Gollum feels like he's a hero or villain of this. Hey, Gollum, do you want to be a hero? he actually mentions that what he thinks. He asks, like, what Gollum would think, because Gollum was off away sneaking. That happens. Nothing with the lamp spread and all that happens again. But I felt sad right there, because Sam actually acknowledging Gollum is like, I wonder if he feels like he'd be a hero or villain in this story. Hey, Gollum, do you want to be a hero? Because they were talking about if there would be in old tales and everything, how they would fit and all that. It almost felt like there, despite all that, and despite the suspicions and him not trusting Gollum, it felt like right there that Sam actually was like warming up to Gollum almost right there. Because he had kept his word and gotten him all the way up there. So it's just kind of like, man, that's, for a brief moment, it's like, that's the moment's probably been the saddest I've been reading the book. It's just like, man, that's pressing. It's like Sam actually might have been warming up the Gollum. That's sad. That is sad. That is like, man, that only get betrayed right after. Like, oh gosh, that sucks. But man. So that was an interesting little tidbit I felt. But they, of course, Frodo's not really dead after the sting. Of course, she stabbed him in the neck, not in the body. The orcs find him. Sam takes the ring, but in order to hide from the orcs, because he doesn't know where to hide or anything, and his elvish cloak won't do, he actually puts the ring on. No joke. He puts the ring on and keeps it on for a long time. They take him to the tower, and that's how the book ends. He gets locked out, and he doesn't know how to get in. He's trying to look for a way in. That's how the book ends, with him with the ring on. So it's like, oh, he actually put the ring on. Interesting. He actually left, because he thought he was dead, he left his sword with Frodo. That way he would have, like, quote-unquote, ceremonial thing, but he would have to but he took Sting, because Sting would be more useful going forward, because he didn't know what to do. Of like, I have a choice to stay by you, or I have a choice to go forward. And because he thought Frodo was dead, and his thing was like, I'm going to have to go forward and do this without you. It's really a sad lament, because for a while, Tolkien makes you think, oh yeah, Frodo's dead. Frodo's actually dead, only to find out by, like, Shabag or whatever his name is. Nope, he's not dead. You had to fight him in the Return of the King game, if you don't remember. Remember the Return of the King game? You had the three paths. You had, like, Gandalf's path, you had Frodo and Sam's path, and you had Aragorn's path. You had all those paths and everything like that. But, you had to fight Shebag or whatever in the in the game more in the movie like version. But we'll see what Return of the King brings forth. Now, the whole section with Faramir, probably a lot of changes right there. They get it starts off, them in that area and stuff, and of course he does do the potatoes thing, like potatoes. So Sam does do that. Of course, they find the men find them, but they actually find them beforehand, before the battle begins. They do the battle with a couple of guards nearby who are speaking again in their own language in different ways, and then switching back and forth between that and the common tongue. And then they do that. Faramir questions Frodo in front of a whole bunch of men out there in the open for a little while. Asks them a whole bunch of questions concerning, giving different ideas and stuff, find out who they are, then discovers, oh, you were with Boromir. Tell us about Boromir and everything like that. What happened? And seemingly, he knows Boromir did indeed die. I think it was in the extended version they show Faramir at the river and the boat with Boromir passing by. That, I think that was the thing in the movie. That happened in the book. Although it was not clear if it was a real thing or a dream, because even Faramir didn't exactly know. If it was a vision, dream, he wasn't sure. Although Frodo would be confused of if he was in a boat, how would he get from the boat all the way down there, still in one piece? Well, Faramir chalked it up to maybe, it's an elvish boat. There's probably magic in the boat. The boat probably, even though he went over that cliff like you see in the movie, the boat kept him upright the entire time because elvish boat or magic. They do crap like that. I was like, interesting. But whether it's actually real or a dream, even Faramir is like, he was convinced, yeah, it's real, but he's like, well, either way. Faramir is able to guess what the ring is, or guess that Frodo has Isildur's Bane, even though it wasn't supposed to be mentioned, but Sam accidentally blurts it out in the cave. Oh yeah, it's the ring. And it's just kind of like, Faramir's like, don't speak of this again. But Faramir doesn't necessarily want the ring, like the movie version. I see a lot of comments online, people hating the changes to Faramir for this reason. And I was like, okay, I can see why, maybe two separate things, but the nobility of everything was there. Faramir does make mention, like, oh yeah, Captain Faramir able to prove his quality and everything like that. But he really doesn't want the ring and everything, specifically because of what happens to Boromir. Though he gives more insight into who Boromir is in some ways, of how he was, not ambitious, but how he was. I'll say the movie version almost makes, even though yes, book version is still selfless, but movie version almost makes him look more noble and selfless in some ways, more tragic of a character, because movie version he made it look like he was trying to get the ring for his people. Book version Boromir, he was clear like, hey, do this and he would have glory and become like a king. So book version is kind of like more ambitious and everything in some ways was Boromir than movie version in some ways. I don't know. But the reason why I want to say this section for last, because of course the language stuff, what hit me reading all the stuff with Faramir is the education that he had. The education, Tolkien being a professor and everything like that, hanging around with all of them, Lewis and stuff. The education that kind of struck me that Faramir had in this moment. Because Faramir was speaking of, they talk of Mithrandir, who came and he looked at different papers and stuff during that time, when Gandalf went away. He would ask Gandalf questions like, hey, what is this and that? And he wouldn't exactly give him an answer and everything like that, or veiled stuff. Someone said that. But he was so... It's like he mentions like the languages of the papers that, Gandalf was looking at in the movies and everything. It's sometimes in old language that not even all of them will be even able to read anymore, if anything of that. But there's some things that, as being a steward and royal family, quote unquote, they would know different things and spoken of. And just the education that the scholarly attitude that Faramir kind of had in some ways in speaking, it kind of hit me all at once, the nobility that Tolkien is pushing kind of forward. Like, it speaks of Eowyn being, very noble and everything like that. And Miranda Otto does a good job with that in the movie. You see that with her doing the thing with the sword. I know that's people are like, oh, she's doing the thing with the sword and everything, but the way she's looking at Aragorn in that moment, it is giving like a proud look, which is what Eowyn had. Like even when they were leaving Edoras, she appeared like with a sword at the top of the thing, wearing chainmail, looking all royal like. It really focuses on like a kingship nobility. I know he's pulling from different legend stuff, Arthurian and different histories of medieval uh, times and knighthood and everything like that. And him also being English, more in the time of, who was king during that time? King George? I forgot who was king during the early 30s and everything like that, but it was like some sort of King George, right? King George the Third or something? Either way, English kings, stuff like that. But him pulling really from nobility, it really hit with Faramir, but then it kind of made sense more. Like, you see how Éomer is, you see how Éowyn is, you see how Theoden is, you see how Aragorn is. You really see how they are and everything. Yes, Theoden had some like poem stuff. He spoke those words, but that's why I like that section with Theoden, because it's just really the kingship really put forth who Theoden was. So probably the Rohan sections and the Faramir sections were my favorite part of the book. But just it really, honestly, it struck me how just like intelligent, like all these characters really are, and just how educated and everything. And it's just like, wow, that's because you go through all what Faramir's saying about the history of like he's speaking of things like Gandalf, he's speaking of different stuff. It's just like it's just a short chapter or these sections, but he's just like outside Gandalf. I'll put it this way: outside Gandalf, Faramir seemed like one of the smartest people in the book, or in the book so far. He just seemed like well, he's a steward of Gondor, and it really showed like a keen awareness of everything going on, probably far more than Boromir. I would have to say Boromir may have been more of the warrior side, much more stronger and everything on that end, which Faramir I think would relent to, but keen awareness of everything, fight. I think Faramir probably had him on that end, and him being able to do like, yeah, you're carrying something. No, well, thanks to Sam blurting it out, it's the ring, but he already kind of knew what it was without exactly knowing what it was. He's just like, you have something, Isildur's Bane. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's not good. And he didn't want it. He was going to go to Skilioth, do stuff. But man, yeah, Faramir is impressive in the book. Absolutely impressive. I know seemingly a lot of people don't like the movie version, that he was tempted and he was thinking of doing the thing and stuff. They changed a lot, like them going to Skilioth. That's probably the most different part between movie and book is Frodo and Sam going to Skilioth after they're captured. Faramir lets them go. And he lets them go to the trap and everything, but he says, don't trust Smeagol. He says, don't trust the creature Gollum. He makes it known, don't trust the creature Gollum. But it is... Faramir's impressive. And just the education that really hit me of the nobility of how each of these characters are really is like, well... I know that's kind of a weird place to end it with my video, but I really, really wanted to focus on that because it's just like really impressive of like, it's just impressive how Faramir is and everything. I had more comments of Saruman, but I do not remember everything I was going to say. Maybe I'll remember it in a different thing, but I know there's more to Saruman's story, so it's not like it ends like where it's at in the movies. Although the Trollolo version is hilarious. I was showing my dad that one time, the Trollolo Saruman thing, and my dad laughed his head off with that. It's like, shoot him again. So it's funny on that. But it's just a funny memory I could always keep with that. But Faramir's impressive book-wise. Much more a movie. Although I every time I kept seeing his words, I kept thinking of I think it's David Winham, the actor, how his voice would say everything like that prestige voice and stuff, which probably Faramir would have, honestly. That educated, high up voice and everything. It's just kind of like, seriously, go. If you don't do anything else for reading this book, I would highly recommend it simply for Faramir alone. For Faramir, and if you want to study kind of looking at kind of like nobility in some ways, character, this book, for me, maybe for nobody else, but for me, the nobility really hit with Faramir, and seeing how intelligent, wise, and just perceptive of how a lot of people can be and stuff is like, oh wow, that kind of changes how the views of look and everything like that. And I want to, because I see stuff of people comparing Tolkien and J.R.R. Martin online, and the best review I can see is this, from my perspective. Not that I know anything about Game of Thrones. I know some things that happen, and I know the plot line. I know who can finish their series comparably, but the difference between the nobility between, I would say this, between Martin and Tolkien. Martin wants to look at the worst in human beings, like how everyone sucks. Tolkien is emphasizing what the best in people can be. Like, honestly, like, he's trying to show, like the, not cool. Yeah, there's bad things that happen to people, because, what happened to Boromir and everything else like that, but kind of emphasizing, like, how good guys can be and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like, yeah, just for no other reason alone. If you want to check out an interesting behind this in between lines thing of nobility and stuff in Faramir, read this book. I'm going to start reading Return of the King. I may not read it as fast as before, like I did this book within a month. That's because I'm going to be starting college soon, and I'm going to be doing some other things, so I'll get to that and read it fully when I'm done. But I also have this that I'm reading through by Lewis. Probably next book review will be on this, so you'll see that soon. But I hope you like this video. Again, Theoden's poems, I remembered it after the fact, like, Where's the Horse Rider and different stuff, and there's actually a little bit longer to that than what it was. And going back to the Rohan section, that's the second thing, the Rohan section. For that reason, those two reasons, Faramir and the Rohan section, felt more poignant reading it than it did. Movie version's fantastic. Where is the horse and the rider? And then the montage and everything. I think he says that actually at Edoras, not at Helm's Deep, but still, nonetheless, Rohan section and Faramir. Rohan section and Faramir are the reasons why you need to read this book. So everything with Theoden at Edoras and stuff like that, and Faramir at the cave are the reasons why you need to read this book. So tell me what you think of the Two Towers, differences you don't like between the movies. I know I see why people may not like the things with Faramir and stuff, because Faramir is very impressive. But just let me know what you think and stuff like that, and I'll see you in the next review. Goodbye.